Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the Horsemen podcast. Yeah, it's been a little while since the quite memorable episode of the top 10 albums of the last decade, but we are finally back after working the kinks out, and we are back to talk about the most depressing genre of them all, doom metal. But of course, I'm joined by the typical blokes. First, right above me, is the man who haunts me with all of his life, Artur Castanha. I push my fingers into my eyes!
Yellow.
Then right next to him is our favorite woman from Germany, Hannah Klein. Who, by the way, is now on her phone, considering her computer is being a piece of shit. But nonetheless. Yeah, and then right underneath her is none other than, well, the one guy wearing a Doom shirt today, or related to Doom, Ricky Horror Master Karaman.
Yellow.
And of course, first time rocking my AC/DC shirt that I got for Christmas. So... But hey, I see an AC/DC patch on your jacket, Ricky, so don't be jealous. But nonetheless, so we're here to talk about Doom, the slowest genre of them all, depending on your vocabulary of what Doom is. And of course, when we talk Doom metal, there are so many other subsects of Doom. There's Stoner, there's Sludge, there's Death Doom, Blackened Doom, Gothic Doom, Funeral Doom. It's all over
Progressive.
Progressive Doom.
Yes. Progressive
Blackened Doom.
Yeah, Folk Doom. It's all over the place. So, the first question...
Funeral Doom?
I did say Funeral Doom. But the first... question to answer is, how did all of us get into this somber subgenre of Doom? For me, I got into Doom quite later in my heavy metal journey because most people know I'm a thrash and death metal and prog metal freak. So I'm more of a fan of the fast, more aggressive form of metal, but Doom I got into thanks to some documentaries or interviews with other bands, and also Black Sabbath being the progenitor, so to speak, of this style. And from that you would discover bands in the traditional Doom scene like Candlemass, St. Vitus, Trouble, The Obsessed, Pentagram, among so many others that are out there. And then eventually, as I discovered traditional Doom, I heard about all these other subgenres or microgenres of Doom, like Gothic, Gothic Doom, Death Doom, Funeral Doom, Sludge, Stoner, all these things that just kept adding on to the different layers of Doom. You had Death Doom, which is basically slow death metal. Blackened Doom, basically slow black metal almost. You get Funeral Doom, the slowest of them all and the most depressing of them all. Gothic Doom with the more gothic imagery, you could say. Some people like to say Epic Doom is a genre, but I don't think so. That's just Doom with operatic vocals. That's really it. There's... what else did I bring up? Oh yeah, Sludge, which is basically punk mixed with Doom. And then Stoner, basically the more psychedelic variety, so to speak. And of course there are even fusion genres like Stoner Sludge, which gets really complicated. Oh, don't want to bring out that can of worms from that Lock Horns episode when they tried to combine both Stoner and Sludge.
Oh, that was a mess.
That was such a mess. Yeah. Plus, Natalie Zed was a total idiot, thinking St. Vitus was Stoner. Really? No.
Not really. I mean, like a predecessor, I would agree, but like,
straight up Doom.
Sludge, nah.
Is it the same Natalie Zed that still says that something about, what was it, Malakesh being folk metal?
Oh boy, you still won't let that go, won't you?
He won after all these years.
That is true. It has
I'm
been
not
over
letting
4
that
years.
go, and Levi, you're not letting also this go. Bolt thrower not being on the death metal list.
Well, I mean, they did make the band list, but no album on the albums list. I get that. But nonetheless, so that was my journey into Doom. Ricky, how did your journey into Doom metal start?
Well, I think it started with Banger TV when they do the Doom Metal episode. And some of those bands I already knew, like Black Sabbath, Saint Vitus, Pentagram. And then they started saying like bands like Trouble, bands like The Obsessed, and then after that, well, I met you guys, and I got into the Peaceful Three, Paradise Lost, My Time Bride, and Anathema. And then after that, Death Dude came to the picture, bands like Aspects, bands like Swallow the Sun, and
Autopsy.
then oh yeah, of course Autopsy, and then
Early Autopsy.
oh yeah, and then after that, well, it's just been one of those subgenres that lately become one of my favorites that I still have yet to know a lot because there's so many um, bands that can get in that category. Like for example, Melvin's being the sludge band can be considered, kind of doomy, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like the sludge stoner band, stoner around
Isn't
there.
Melvin's also grunge band?
Yeah, I mean, you can say that too.
Yeah, you could say that. They're sludge and grunge. That's a weird combination.
Yeah, that's a new sub genre. And that's about it. I mean, after that, it's guess like I said, Black Sabbath being the originators of doom metal in a way.
Yep. Hannah, how did your journey into Doom start?
Well, I'm not quite sure because I mean I was just listening to so much music at that time, and a few doom metal bands were among those artists I was listening to. I mean, I think the first real doom metal band I listened to was a.k.a. Still love them. A bit of a weird starter, but great nevertheless. And I also listened to a lot of stoner metal and stoner rock at that time. I think that's what mostly started it all. And then, I mean, just mostly fusion genres like combinations of black and doom and folk and doom. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of pure doom bands because it's it's still great but not too interesting for me because I'm more a fan of weird mixtures and fusions and combinations of shit, but still I what I really love about doom is the atmosphere, and I get that a lot from those fusion bands.
Alright, and Artur.
I think that I'll put my introduction to doom metal when we talk about a certain. I'll leave it at that.
Alrighty. So now
Alright.
that we've discussed how we got into Doom, it's time to get to our honorable mentions for our topic for today: top 10 Doom metal albums. I shall begin. I have five completely different bands within so many subsects of Doom. First, probably the most underground of all the bands on this list, Unholy, who are a death black doom avant-garde band from Finland, and I went with their first album, From the Shadows, because it was so primitive, and not to mention it was very avant-garde in the sense that they brought in unusual instruments like bongos and unusual percussive instruments into some parts of their songs. Plus, vocally, it kind of is like a combination of Martin Van Drunen mixed with, I would say, even though Nurgle wasn't doing death metal vocals around this time, kind of reminds me of what Nurgle does now, so it's like that mixed with Martin, because it's got that torturous sound. But yeah, From the Shadows by Unholy, kind of more of an extreme metal blender of doom, black metal, and death metal with some avant-garde thrown into it. Next one, I thank Blaine Smith for getting me into this band, Hooded Menace. And the album I chose, it's gotta be Effigies of Evil. It's their heaviest, most brutal album. And I like the style of Hooded Menace because it's like they're combining the Swedish death metal sound with doom. Kind of like one person on like Metallum I saw say it's as if Bloodbath is covering Candlemass. That's about like how it is as far as the vibe of the band. Plus, this album's got some of my favorite doom songs in general, like the title track, Crumbling Insanity, probably my personal favorite, In the Dead We Dwell, which is powerful in itself. But yeah, Effigies of Evil by Hooded Menace. How about a more traditional one, and that's Cathedral Forest of Equilibrium. I mean, Cathedral, it's funny to think that this band rose out of the ashes of Lee Dorian leaving Napalm Death and decided to embrace his metal influences, more the doom bands he was getting into, with Sabbath getting into St. Vitus, Trouble, Pentagram, Candlemass. Basically decided, you know what? I'm tired of doing grindcore and death metal. Let's embrace old school, slow, heavy metal and bring it back to the forefront, so to speak. And how came this album? You could maybe argue this is kind of death doomy because vocally it's still kind of death metal at times, but it's more known as a traditional doom album, though much slower than the other bands around that time. I mean, Ebony Tears is a classic off this album, and Lee's growls were still quite strong. Probably stronger on this album than they were back when he was with Napalm. Next album, probably the most recent album on my list, and I really liked it when I heard it, Crypt Sermon, In the Ruins of Fading Light. That was such a good album that caught me by surprise, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give that another shout out. And then my last honorable mention is probably the saddest album that I have ever heard in my life, Bell Witch Mirror Reaper. That album is a journey in of itself. 83 minutes, one song album, just nothing but bass, organ, drums, and vocals, no guitars. But yet it still sounded heavy and scary and sad and atmospheric and whoa. That's all I can really describe it, is just wow. And I remember, I didn't listen to this album when it came out a few years ago. I listened to it afterwards, and I was like, how is something that's this long this good? Like, how do they do it? And I actually look forward to seeing what Bell Witch has in store next, whenever that may be. Hannah, your honorable mentions.
Well, I've got 7. The first one is Death Penalty by Witchfinder General. I mean, I consider this album to be a classic, but the reason why it didn't make it on the list is because I think it's a bit too much rooted in classic heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, there's still lots of doom elements that can be found on this album, but in my opinion, it wasn't quite enough to make it on the list.
Honorable mention. That should be an honorable mention. I completely forgot about Death Penalty. Shit.
It's on my list.
Well, the next one is Solstice New Dark Age. In my opinion, one of the best epic doom albums there is, and they recently reformed and released an awesome album. And I mean, this one it's just so epic, and the storytelling and the kind of atmosphere this album sets. In my opinion, it's an awesome album. And then next one, Thergothon, Streams from the Heavens. I mean, it's on the same path as Skepticism. It's a groundbreaking album, but sadly, I could never quite get into it. I think it's, in my opinion, it's a very important album, but it's just not my cup of tea, and but I wanted to mention it. Then the next one is Winter Into Darkness.
Oh, I
one of-
forgot about Winter. Shit.
Honorable mention.
Another honorable mention.
I mean, one of those little underground albums that I released and years after gained a cult following. I mean, there is another one of those on my actual list, and Winter would have been there if it hadn't been for that other album. The thing with Winter is, I mean, I consider it to be quite important, and I mean, it's atmospheric as hell, and to me, a very weird album, but I prefer another release over this one. And then the next two albums are quite recent albums. Job, Our Raw Heart, and Paul Bearer's Sorrow and Extinction.
Forgot about you.
I mean, Job and Paul Bearer, in my opinion, as well as Quick Sermon, are among the most important current doom metal bands there are. All of them have released awesome music in the last decade. But I think they have to age a bit more in order to make it on the list. And then the last one, I talked about this on the last episode, Woods of Ypres, Woods 5, Grey Skies and Electric Lights. Again, a classic album. I mean, it's so special to me considering the death of David Gold, and it's just such a powerful and emotional album, and also includes this kind of gothic elements. Just such a perfect album, but there are other ones, and that's why those are only on the honorable mention list.
If I were to include another recent one, I would say, even though I just got into listening to songs off the album, the latest Spirit Adrift album, I've just started getting into.
Oh
them.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
The Way of Return.
All right, Artur.
I have 6 in my honorable mentions, and some of them have already been spoiled. Witchfinder General, Death Penalty. Witchfinder General are considered among the creators of the doom metal genre. Penalty is the great symbol of it. I also have Winter Into Darkness as well in my honorable mentions list. I also have my first of the Peaceful 3 band, and Anathema, and I have the Silent Enigma on the honorable mentions list. It's difficult, not full-on list, but one of them had to go up, sorry. I also have from America Trouble, Psalm 9, and this was mostly thanks to that doom metal albums on Banger TV that I got a chance to listen. I also have Day of Reckoning by Pentagram. I mean, old school black metal, old school doom metal, I'm sorry. Pentagram is up. And I also have one that's not entirely doom metal, but it does have some elements of doom. And you probably will hate me for this. Danzig. The first Danzig album, especially Twisted Cain, especially with music, especially with songs like Twisted Cain, Am I Demon. But later, he would perfect some of those doom characteristics, especially on one of my personal songs of Danzig, which was basically a song that he wrote for the great eternal Johnny Cash called 13. And it is as doom as they come. So, those are my honorable mentions.
All right. Me.
Meh.
Meh.
I like how you can see a light come off of this thing. All right, and Ricky.
Well, I have 6 honorable mentions. I have Electric Wizard, Job Throne, which was very difficult to me to put it at the very bottom because I'm more of a stoner band, and I'm not much into.
Dope Throne is my number 9.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, stoner metal is one of those subgenres that I try my best to get into, but I'm like, it's difficult for me to get into it, even though I don't get stoned on. You know what I mean. Next up, and I really, really tried to put it on the list, but I couldn't. I was disappointed for not putting it up a bit higher on the list. Swallow the Sun, Songs from the North 1, 2, and 3. You guys know I've been into Swallow the Sun lately, and I could have gone with their debut album, which is a bit more doomier, but
It's
I
on my
like,
list. Swallow the Sun.
but like I like the more later stuff, the more elaborated orchestral stuff. And next to when the Shaft was into the light, Songs from the North, probably like my second favorite Swallow the Sun album. Next up, going with the whole stoner metal, Sleep, Dope Smoker.
I have Sleep on my list, but not that album.
I mean, like I said, an hour and 10 minute song around there, just pure heaviness. It's kind of difficult for me to get to it in one sitting after like take a break, listen to it again, take a break, because I don't know why, and I love songs specifically for me to get into it. Next up, I have a tie. Both Psalm 9 and The Skull by Trouble. A pioneer of doom metal. I mean, I prefer more Psalm 9 than The Skull, but I feel The Skull is, again, is more influential as Psalm 9 as well, so I want to give it a shout out. Bell Witch, Mirror Reaper. I mean, Levi already said it, one of the most depressive long songs ever, and it's so beautiful.
Not to mention, probably one of the best album covers of all time.
Oh yeah. And last but not least, kind of an odd one that might raise some eyebrows, but I decided to put it anyway, and that is Hymns Greatest Love Songs Volume 666. Since
Going in the more gothic realm.
Yeah, the more gothic realm. And there's another gothic album a bit higher in the list. Spoiler alert. But Hymn Greater Love Songs Volume 666 has some very doomy songs, like for example the intro track For You, which for all purposes, that song could have been a perfect song for the Crow movie when it came out. I wish it would have been on that movie. And also the song, probably my favorite hymn song, When Love and Death Embrace. Again, very doomy, but yet so beautiful. And then you have the cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. Very, very soft, very, very slow. I mean, this whole album, to me, it's one of my favorites of all time. Highly recommend it, but again, it didn't make the cut. I wish it would have made the cut. It was tough decision.
Well, now that we got through all of our honorable mentions, now it's time to get into the top 10, and Hannah, I'll let you start.
Just before I start with my list, I just wanted to warn that I've got quite a few ties because I couldn't decide on certain albums, and I will start with a tie right now. My first album on number 10 is Blood Geometry by Elysian Blaze, a one-man funeral doom death black metal project from Australia, I think, and this is just a monolith of an album. It's slow at times, very atmospheric, and uses lots of keyboards, but at other moments, I mean, it's just blazing and blasting blast beats, and it's just such a roller coaster of an emotion, and it's just such an epic album. I mean, I discovered it while I was waiting for a lecture at university, and I had exactly 2 hours time to wait, and this album is almost 2 hours long, so I had a nice break listening to that album, and ever since then I've been coming back to it. And then the second one, I mean, I've talked about the Ruins of Beverest on my black metal album list already, but in the more albums they release, the more they move towards doom metal, and the doom influence becomes more evident on each passing album. I mean, be it Blood Walls or the Foulest Semen album. But I selected Exuvia, the latest one, and it feels like you're entering a cave when you're listening to this album, and you're listening to this very condensed kind of wall of sound, and it's such an impressive soundscape they create. I mean, it's slow at times, it picks up speed at other times, and then on this album, what's special about it, it has this kind of Native American theme, and they include this chanting every once in a while, and it's really impressive what they create with this album, and it works well live. I've seen him twice now performing songs of this album, and it's just such a thick sound, wall of sound they create, and with the growls included by Alexander von Meilenwald. Epic album, and I think both are kind of similar. Both albums on my number 10. More on the blackened side of doom, and awesome.
Well, my number 10, this might raise some eyebrows. Maybe not. Maybe it might be on some people's list, though. I don't know. And it's amazing to me how we keep coming back to this particular album. It's partially doom, partially folk, partially black, partially prog. A.k.a. the Mantle.
What?
It's my
Raphael
number 8.
is on the horn.
But I mean, it's just amazing how we all keep coming back to this album. It's like one of those albums that we all love, and it just, wow. Like I said, it's a combo, it's a hybrid album. It's quite doomy in terms of the speed and the atmosphere, also blackened with the vocal approach and how the production is, but proggy in the sense of it being long songs that don't follow a standard format, and folk for its instrumentation, of course. And I mean, the one song we can all agree that's a monumental classic, In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion. I mean, enough said. So yeah, A.k.a. the Mantle at my number 10.
I think after all the times we talk about the Mantle, A.k.a. must be like, man, this guy really like the Mantle.
We should do an episode solely on the Mantle.
Oh,
or the Satanist.
We will eventually.
I
the Nameless Dead.
Prefer, and Hannah would probably agree with, an episode on Primordial.
Oh yeah.
To the Nameless Dead, all my top 10 songs, all the album will be there. Done.
Ricky, you're number 10.
Well, being that metal just turned 50 years old, I think it's obvious that we start with the originators of doom metal. My first of 2 Black Sabbath albums. And I decided to put number 10, the one that started it all,
Black Sabbath.
the debut Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. The first
I think Artur hit the wrong button again.
just when I was about to start. But anyway, Black Sabbath. What more can we say about the band? The first song, Black Sabbath, the first doom song ever created. I mean, you had the diminished fifth right out of the gate, like boom.
Yep.
And not only that, but you have songs like The Wizard.
And Geezer Butler was inspired Holtz, the planet's suit, the opera. And if you listen to Mars, that has the riff or the sound. But Ricky, I'm guessing, and I can guess which album is your second one. Let me guess.
Yeah, it's that one.
Bow, 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 bow.
But that's a bit higher on the list.
It's my number 2. Both Black Sabbath and Master of Reality are my number 2.
And while we're on the subject of Master of Reality, that's my number one.
Same
Well,
here.
well, it's my number one too. Might as well just say it. Well, but back to the debut.
I'm the only one that Black Sabbath. I'm the only one that doesn't have number one.
Because I know what
But
your
you
number
can-
one is. I know what it is. And I know you're going to hate me when I say it. But anyway, back to the debut. Songs like The Wizard, songs like NIAB, Behind the Wall of Sheep.
Wicked World. I mean, I still
Wicked
enjoy
World.
Wicked World, especially with that bass riff, and I still humming. Da, na, 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 na. It's good either for guitar and for bass.
Yeah. Some people consider the first debut to be more bluesy, which to a certain extent I agree, but also you gotta look at Paranoid. Paranoid is more bluesier than the debut. And if you want to get more technical, Sabotage is more progressive than anything else ever created it. But like I said, Black Sabbath created all the genres. They created doom, they created traditional, they created progressive. It all started
And even, to some extent, thrash with Symptom of the Universe.
True. But like I said, it all started with the debut when four guys decided to make a band back in 1968, renamed themselves from Earth to Black Sabbath from the movie Black Sabbath. I mean, how much iconic can you get? The debut album Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath, and the first song is called Black Sabbath.
Which is quite a trend in doom.
Mm-hmm. It's like with Iron Maiden, the debut album Iron Maiden with the song Iron Maiden.
May I interject? Geezer Butler has stated on several interviews that the first song that they ever created was not Black Sabbath. It was actually Wicked World, and then it was Black Sabbath.
Yep.
Yeah, but I had to mention the debut. If without the debut, doom metal would never be what
Heavy metal as a whole wouldn't exist.
Metal as a whole.
It's ironic that the first metal album also happened to introduce the first doom song, which fits.
Like I said, 50 years.
Yep. And now, Artur, you're number 10.
Oh, well, it swallowed the sun. But with the album that I'm going to put is not one of the older ones. I'm going to put the recent one, When the Shadow is Forced into. I mean,
Honorable mention.
We all know. Huh? I mean, we talked about Swallow the Sun so good, and is it ironic to think that some of the best doom metal songs have come out when members have passed away? With Swallow the Sun, it was the death of the lead singer's girlfriend.
The guitarist. There was a guitarist.
My Dying Bride, the daughter of Aaron Stanhope, the vocalist that passed away. And what was the song that you said, Hannah, of Woods of Yips?
Cypress. What was it called?
Finality?
No. I'm looking it up.
Kiss My Ashes Goodbye.
Yeah, Kiss My Ashes Goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, is it ironic to think that some of the best doom metal songs / albums have come after tragedy, struck?
It's fitting.
It's sad to think, but it is what it is. And we talked about so much about Swallow the Sun being the great masterpiece that it was. Several of our lists has become 2019's album of the year, but even though Swallow the Sun, they tend to go all directions in terms of their doom, I think that with When a Shadow is Forced into Light, it really has come together to create a masterpiece. So,
while we're on you, Artur, let's start with you at number 9999999.
9? Can't hear
One of
you.
you probably
Oh, there you are.
already
There you go.
mentioned.
Oh, there you go.
One of you probably already mentioned my number 9, but this is a band that really does be in that border between doom and stoner. The Dope Throne by Electric Wizard. I mean,
That was me.
but I mean that raunchy bass, those killer songs. I mean that whole weirdness surrounding Electric Wizard, which has been a bit of a mysterious sort of a band to a certain extent. It really makes for it to become a really great band. And Dope Throne from the year 2000, or I'm sorry, in the year 2000. If you don't know what that is, watch Conan O'Brien. But Dope Throne is an absolute, and my number 9.
Hannah.
My number 9 is probably the most underground album on my list, and it's only an EP. It's Thor's Hammer. That's the band, and the album or the EP is called Domedag's Nut.
Oh, yeah.
This album is just this kind of weird thing that happened because a Norwegian exchange student spent a few weekends with Greg Anderson and Stephen O'Malley, who would later form Sun, the great drone metal band out of Washington, still the state of Washington. And it only contains 3 songs, and Runhild Gammelset, or whatever her name is, was only like 16 at a time when she recorded the vocals for this album, and she did both the clean vocals and the guttural vocals, and it's just amazing if you consider her age and the reason why she even was there in the first place. They reformed again in 2010 for Roadburn, and performed the album again, or the EP again, and it's just such a chilling little EP they put out there. It's atmospheric, it's slow, it's deep, the guitars are fuzzy as fuck, and it's just such a catchy one. And much like Winter, it gained a cult following years later. In my opinion, it's the better one out of the 2 of them, and you can really hear what Sun would later do on this early effort. They were so young at that point, but it's still such an awesome album, and I think people should know about it more.
Yeah, and the funny thing with Runhild, like, I remembered watching a video from Loudwire. They did, like, top 15 most guttural vocalists, and she was on that list, and I didn't even think she was a woman. I thought it was a dude singing that style, because she probably deeper than any other female extreme metal vocalist out there.
The funny thing is, there are videos of Roadburn, and you can watch her perform the songs live. And she has a PhD in PhD in biology or something like that, and she was dressed like really business-like, and then she was performing the vocals, physiology and medicine, and she was dressed really nicely, and then suddenly she was doing those gutturals, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's just one of those weird little things that happen, and nobody knows how they actually happen, but it's so awesome.
And if I must say, Runhild, she's actually a very pretty woman.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt. My number 9 is my only gothic hybrid album on my list. I think Ricky knows what it is. Bloody Kisses by Typo Negative. Probably their most doomy album they ever did. And it's only their third album after their first two kind of being a little more gothic thrash. Because considering Peter Steele came out of Carnivore, which was like a raw thrash crossover band. So, like, the first two Typo albums were kind of still in that vein, but slower. And then you get to Bloody Kisses, where Peter's vocal style completely changed. Instead of doing, like, the more hardcore thrash yells, you get this, like, very deep bass baritone voice that he became known for throughout the rest of his career. And Bloody Kisses was an absolute masterwork when it came out in '93.
Isn't that the album with Black Number?
Yep.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that song. I'm not a big fan of Typo Negative, but I know so many people that were. But I still enjoy some of their stuff. But Doom, borderline, but Gothic Doom.
Yeah, Gothic Doom. And I remembered, I think I talked about this album with Scott on the Top 10 Roadrunner Records albums, because this was a huge album for that label at the time. And yeah, Black Number 1, Christian Woman, and who'll ever forget the classic cover of Summer Breeze by Seals and Croft, which the way they did it is so unique. They make it sound like a Doom song. And it's so good.
Am I the only one that, out of the entirety of the covers that Typo Negative did, my favorite cover that they did, and they did their own version of Kane's Theme, so that's a kudos there. But I've always enjoyed more the cover of Highway Star, of Deep Purple's Highway Star, that Typo Negative also did later.
And probably they did arguably the most evil Black Sabbath cover of the song Black Sabbath, where it was slower and more demonic. And that's just a testament to how influential Sabbath was to Peter Steele. And, of course, they would keep some Doom aspects going forward, but they more embraced the Gothic side, if anything. And, I mean, hell, the following album, October Rust, you could maybe put on here, even though it's closer to Gothic than to Doom. But it's in that realm. But yeah, Bloody Kisses by Typo Negative, and rest in peace, Peter Steele. And one other thing I enjoy about this album is that while it's dark and such, there is an element of dark humor that I really, really enjoy, and that's just from Peter's natural sense of humor as a person. I mean, hell, who will ever forget the classic Howard Stern interview when Howard was reading a quote about how Kurt Cobain was his biggest hero because he had the, quote, balls to kill himself. And they're like, ask him, you're a really depressed individual, aren't you? More like repressed. I'm like, Peter, you are a fucking goof. Or him sweeping Pantera stage and sweeping Phil off.
What I love most was the Jerry Springer one.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. He's like, I'm not here to have a good time. I'm here to pay my phone bill.
Yeah, and even the entrance. I mean, praying, then spitting in the face.
And it's hard to believe it's been pretty much 10 years since we lost Peter, and how funny he was, how cool he was, and how creative he was in both his bands.
How many years has it been since we lost Dio?
10 years.
They both died around the same time. But,
sadness.
Yeah. But number 9, Bloody Kisses by Typo Negative. Ricky.
My number 9, and meh, was already spoiled by Hannah Archer, which is Witchfinder General Death Penalty.
'Cause I'm the Witchfinder General.
Yeah, I mean, when Banger brought up this album in the doom metal debate, a lot of people were saying this is a borderline new album.
Yeah.
Me being a new album freak, I, to a certain extent, agreed because around the time they were very different than their predecessors, like Tigers of Panchang, like Raven, like Saxon.
Iron Maiden.
They were almost in the same category Venom were, being that they were taking different elements, very I don't want to say satanic elements, but more
Occult.
Cool.
occult things. Yeah, like occult things that, like I said, people like Maiden, Tigers Panchang, Saxon, Raven wouldn't touch that much.
Some that would say that were inspired by Genesis and also by the Wonderful World of Arthur Brown.
Yeah, and also the album cover of that album. It's basically I don't want. I think it's the Salem witch trials or a
Yeah.
Thanksgiving around there. I mean, how much doomier can you get than the Salem witch trials, which it has influenced not a lot of songs, a lot of bands. I mean, Witchfinder General, that name alone, Witchfinder General, that's a direct descendant from the Salem witch trial.
And one
Which
may
the
argue.
comparison,
No, you go ahead.
which the comparison, the European counterpart of the Witchfinder General would be the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, one could argue that with Witchfinder General, they were pretty much inspired by like the first two Black Sabbath albums, where it's doomy but also on the blues side, and jammy, which I do enjoy about with that album from Witchfinder. So, well, while we're on you, Ricky, let's start with you for. Oh wait, I have to get ready. Number 8. Damn it! Hold on, I'll get it.
Get it out of there!
Number 8.
Go, Barney, go!
Oh, there we go. That tasted like sausage and bacon. Holy shit.
Well,
Anyways, number 8. I'm not
Well-
doing it again.
my number 8, burp, is a band that Archer introduced me to when we first started talking. Paradise Lost, and I'm gonna go with Gothic.
You going Death Doom on us.
Yeah.
I'm going as well.
Well, there you go.
Well, there you go.
But
Like
continue.
I said, I don't have Anathema on my list because Anathema, I not a big fan of Anathema. I do have.
Same here!
I mean, I do like some of their songs, but when it comes to the Pistol 3, Anathema's kind of like Anthrax in the Big Four. They're like a bit left out in
Yeah.
a way, but that's beside the point.
Not to mention,
Par-
Anathema didn't really stay the course. They also,
Mhm.
pretty much after their early stuff, they became more of a prog band.
Mhm.
So,
But
Put it
you
like
know,
this. Put it like this. In the Big Four of thrash metal, Anthrax are usually the forgotten one. In the Peaceville 3 category, Anathema are usually the forgotten.
mhm.
same
with
with
Paris-
same with the German Big Four thrash. Tankard gets forgotten about too.
Mhm.
But now,
What they
Yeah.
said about beer.
But you know, this album to me was my introduction to Paradise Lost, which at the time I didn't know was the name Paradise Lost was based on a book that came a bit
Milton.
later. And then I like this album. I mean, it's not my favorite. That honor goes to I don't know the name of the album. It's the album that has the song Hollow Land. I don't know
Draconian Times.
You mean this one?
Yeah, that's my favorite Paradise Lost album. But
Mine would be Lost Paradise, the first album.
in terms of
Uh,
influence,
I'll mention a spoiler, so to say.
but in terms of influence on the Doom spectrum, this album is a pioneer of not just Doom but Death Doom bands. Like I said, My Dying Bride came a bit earlier, and then bands like Swallow Sun, bands like
Catatonia.
you know. That's it, Catatonia. Forgot about Catatonia. Honorable mention, Catatonia.
remember, and this Lindsay Schoolcraft said on that debate on the gothic metal,
Hmm.
you can never split the peaceful three, which are usually these three: Paradise, My Dying Bride, and Anathema.
Yeah. And I was tempting in putting Therion, like the first two Therion albums, but they seem a bit more symphonic. But I was like, no, I'm not
I
gonna
would have
put them.
said the first Therion album is more death thrash, very much like Entombed, and then they got Death Doom before they eventually went symphonic.
Yeah, but like some of these albums can be borderline gothic albums with the gothic metal episode. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna put them again because they're gothic and doom almost have same bands that kind of intertwine with each other. So
Not to
you know,
mention, gothic metal is basically an offshoot of Doom in the first place.
I mean, even the name of the album, gothic. I mean, come on.
Basically coined the term gothic metal.
Yeah, but yeah, that's my number 8, Gothic Paradise Lost.
Mine, oh god. My
Number 8.
is... I had the actual clip ready to go. My number 8, the band has been brought up, Sleep, but it's not Dope Smoker. I never quite got into Dope Smoker. I went with Holy Mountain, the second album, Holy Mountain. And as it's been pointed out from Banger TV and from other people, this was just a demo. This isn't even a studio recording. This is a demo that they sent to Earache Records and trying to get signed. And Earache's like, "This sounds so cool. Let's just put it out like this." That is so cool that Earache themselves, Digby, decide, you know what? We don't need them to come in to do a studio record. This demo sounds just as good. We'll just put it out as an album, and it did, and it's magnificent. Dragonaut, probably my favorite Sleep song. So catchy, but yeah, it's kind of more like early Black Sabbath in the fact that it has a little bit of groove to it, as opposed to like a slower atmosphere to it, but there are a lot of doomy riffs. More like early Doom, where it's not mega slow, more Black Sabbath worship, but yeah, Holy Mountain, you can't go wrong with Sleep, even if, like I said, I haven't quite gotten into Dope Smoker as much as some people have. I'm more of a fan of the early, groovier sounding, stonery stuff, and this is arguably one of the beginning albums of the stoner metal scene, along with Caius and Monster Magnet and Orange Goblin, others. Hannah, you're number 8.
My number 8 has been mentioned before. It's The Mantle by Agalor. So,
Now
I
Artur
think,
feels stupid.
well, if I really had...
The only reason why I feel so stupid is I might be the only one here that doesn't mention Agalok at least once. I know the band, I enjoy it, but
I don't have the mantle either.
not
And
yet.
I was like,
It still has to go deep, so to say.
I mean, The Mantle can be so many things. It can be folky, it can be doomy. There's a bit of black on here, but
Bit
I think,
prog.
yeah, there's a lot of elements can be found in this record, and I think Doom. I mean, Doom elements probably for me are the strongest that can be found on this album, simply because of the atmosphere this album creates. I mean, it feels like walking through the woods. And
on a snowy day, like in Germany.
Yeah, like now. Maybe I should do that later. And listening to this magnificent soundscape this album creates, and the lyrics. I mean, it's just so perfect. And I mean, for me, The Mantle is all about the atmosphere, and to a certain degree also the beauty in the music and the lyrics. But first and foremost, the atmosphere, and that's why it's on on this list and not on any other genre list.
Have I gotten Artur's yet?
Nope.
Okay, so
Correct.
then Artur, you're number 8, burp.
My number 8, yep, goes to a band that they along with along with Ship of Despair from Sweden, they have been going strong in another subgenre called Funeral Doom. It's really the slowest possible type of doom metal that exists. To me, one of the bands that I enjoy the most is Draconian, who is Draconian from Sweden too, and The Burning Halo from 2006. It's probably my favorite album from. It's very much of an acquired taste because Funeral Doom is not for everyone. Is not for everyone, especially if you don't enjoy the slowest, the more drone doomy parts of doom metal, pun intended. Draconian. Not just that. I mean, very slow guitars too, or guitars that pull off one maybe two notes and then go sustain. Not that much. Not that much, but it is a band that, as I said, it is a bit of an acquired taste. Although with 2015 Sovereign, they started to up the tempo in a way, but I mean, Burning Halo, to me, a bit my gateway to Funeral Doom and to Draconian, but also a great album. That's why it's my number 8.
And while we're on you, Artur, let's begin with you for number 7.
I'm going Peaceville. But not yet with Paradise Lost. That is on the horizon. But I'm going with My Dying Bride. And no, I'm not going Age of Orion. No, don't worry, I haven't listened to it yet.
It's not even out yet.
Exactly.
Please don't tell me the same album I have.
It's on torrents. I'm going again an album from 2006, The Line of Deathless Kings.
Oh, thank God.
Sweating bullets. I mean,
I have my
I got a guess in my head on which one you got, Ricky, but I'm gonna wait until we get to it.
It's on my number 7 as well.
Oh, okay, well,
My Dying
continue, Artur.
Bride as well?
Yeah, but I'll let you continue.
I mean, My Dying Bride has always had some great albums like 34.788 Complete. It has also the first one, Turn Loose the Swans, or even For Lies I Sire. But to me, Line of Deathless Kings is doom. It's doom, but it's not over too much doom. And with My Dying Bride, one of the renowned Peaceville 3, it can also be a bit borderline between Gothic and Doom. Although My Dying Bride has always went more on the Doom than on the Gothic side. And Aaron Stanhope Thorpe's and Aaron Kerrigan's always were a great combination to work with. I hope that one day I'll get to see them live, maybe on the under the Doom Festival if they manage to break. But even though they could have put a lot of albums, A Line of Deathless Kings is really an excellent album, which deserves my number 7 here on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Alright, so Ricky, I'm gonna go ahead and take a guess as to which My Dying Bride album is on your list. I'm going to guess Turn Loose the Swans.
Nope.
As the Flower Withers.
Nope.
Dreadful Hours.
Nope.
Light at the End of the World.
Nope.
Not the 34.788% complete.
No.
Angel in the Dark River.
No. Let me just say it.
Okay.
My number 7 is My Dying Bride, Songs of Darkness, Words of Light. I get one of those albums that not a lot of people talk about that album that much. But that album to me was how I got into My Dying Bride. I mean, the song My One in Silence, one of the most depressive, beautiful, doomiest songs I've ever heard in my life. Talk about um, somebody that you love and you want them by your side, but they have gone away, and you're willing to kill yourself for that love, even commit suicide to a certain degree. But that album in its entirety, especially the album cover when it's like an angel turning to a demon that has like his tits out and like covered in blood out in the field and just caught my attention. But like Archer said, My Dying Bride are one of those bands that they're more into the death doom side than the gothic, with some bit of a gothic elements there. But that album, Songs of Darkness, Words of Light, is my personal favorite of My Dying Bride, and I can't wait for the new album, which could be a potential album of the year contender.
All right, Hannah, you're number 7.
My number 7 is Stoner's Heaven. Because I've got 2 albums on here. The first one is Electric Wizard with Dope Throne. I simply love listening to this album. It's the guitars are just so fuzzy, and I mean the atmosphere this one creates. I mean I've never taken these kind of drugs, but I'm sure listening to this album is what it kind of feels like to take them. It's just, I mean, I love listening to it, especially the album Closer and Funeralopolis, both amazing songs. And I've seen them live, and I mean, when I saw them live, the whole crowd at this concert was in this kind of haze, and it's just something else entirely, in my opinion. And then the second one is closely connected to it. It's Sleep with Dope Smoker. I mean, Holy Mountain is also an awesome record, but in my opinion, I mean, what they did with Dope Smoker, just releasing one song that is over an hour long and still keeping it interesting, I mean, that's an achievement in itself. And well, I think both albums kind of belong together. For me, they're the pinnacle of stoner metal and great atmosphere.
My number 7 is the first of 2 ties I have on my list. Both
I'm
were
not the only one with ties. Yes.
both were recorded around the same time, 85. First one I'm going to talk about is Pentagram Relentless, the first album. I mean, very, very catchy stuff, plus Bobby Liebling's vocals, very, very creepy. Plus, I love the song 20 Bucks Spin that coined the name of the eventual death metal record label that we get now, 20 Bucks Spin. Probably that's my favorite Pentagram song of all time, and it's quite fun to listen to. Heck, I even played it a couple times on like my Q&A streams I do every month, which I forgot to do one for this month, but I'll make it up to people, do it next month. But regardless, so that's the first one. The second one, while it was recorded in 85, wasn't released until 5 years later, the Obsessed self-titled debut. A 3-piece band out of Baltimore with Wino, who would eventually go into St. Vitus. It's arguably the most soulful album on the list because Wino's voice on this really captures my attention. Plus, quite fun, quite jammy in its own right. Like the bookend tracks, Tombstone Highway to start, River of Soul to close it. Probably one of the best opening and closing combinations of any album I've ever heard in the history of heavy metal. And for that reason alone, the Obsessed self-titled make the cut.
Honorable mention?
But now we're into number 6, and I shall begin. This one, I could have went with one of 2 albums from this band. Catatonia. 2 albums I could have gone for. Most people, I would assume, would put Brave Murder Day on their list. I went the total opposite. As good as Brave Murder Day is, and as much as I love Michael Ackerfeld on that album, to me that pales in comparison to Dance of December Souls, the first album.
Oh, you almost get our turn.
I almost got him again.
Catatonia is my number 5, but that's not the album. I have a tie of Catatonia albums there. That's not one of them.
But I went with Dance of December Souls because it was their most raw, primitive album.
Neither is Brave.
That's a bit of shock, but yeah, Dance of December Souls, the first album, 93. It's Jonas Rinsky, Anders Nordstrom, and a different bass player they had coming together, hanging out with my favorite musician of all time, Dan Swano, going to record at Unisound Studios, doing this album, which it's more kind of like I brought up with Unholy. It's more of a 3-way mix of death metal, black metal, and doom metal because it has a black metal production. Vocally, this is kind of borderline between death metal and black metal because Jonah's voice on this album kind of reminds me of Wagner from Sarcophago, and it has that torturous vibe to it. But as much as I called Mirror Reaper the most depressing, I honestly would say this album gives it a run for the money for most depressing album ever. Especially the song, I know what it is and I can't remember it. I'll have to look it up. Looking things up on the spot, people. Because I listen to this song all the time, but I always forget the full title. I believe it's, I'm getting to it. I'm sorry. I knew it. Velvet Thorns. That's the song. Probably my favorite Catatonia song of all time. So sad. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, there's a thrashy part in there that they just do a thrash sound. And Jonas's voice gets very black metal, and that goes super high screams before it gets back to being very, very slow. I mean, even some of the more occultish or anti-religious songs like Without God being one of those songs, which also has some of the deepest, most demonic growls I'd ever heard. Tomb of Insomnia is another great one. I mean, Elohim Meth being a good transitionary song. I mean, no question Catatonia is in a highly important band to Doom, whether it be in the Death Doom, Blackened Doom, Gothic Doom, Prog Doom, whatever you want to call it. Alternative Doom, even. They're just all over the place within the Doom spectrum.
Is that even a sub-genre called Alternative Doom?
No, I just came up with it because they kind of later on started to incorporate a bit of an alternative metal sound into it.
Well, we just grew the family tree. You're welcome, Banger.
Well, they'd be the only... Well, maybe another band would be on top of Catatonia, and I might talk about them later. But regardless, Catatonia, Dance of December Souls, at my number 6. Hannah.
Now it's time for me to mention the Peace Will 3. I've got 2 albums. First of all, Turn Loose the Swans by My Dying Bride. I mean, a classic choice, and I can totally understand why. I love the clean singing on this album, and the first track and the last track of the album with the violence, and it's so atmospheric and slow yet deep. Really like this album. And the second one, of course, the legendary Gothic by Paradise Lost. Although I have to say that I'm a big fan of The Plague Within. The album, when they returned back to their Death Doom roots a few years ago. But I mean, Gothic is just a legendary choice. Every song on this is great. slow yet dynamic and pounding. Just love it. And the reason why I haven't got an Anathema album on here, I mean, like you said before, they are kind of the forgotten band of the Peaceville 3. And the thing is, I just can't connect to them.
And if I were to make an argument, Anathema, in my opinion, should have been out of the Peaceville 3. The band that should have replaced them, Autopsy. Just a thought.
Not sure of that. I mean, they started out heavy at first, but then kind of turned in this kind of progressive direction.
Progressive alternative.
And the thing is, a few years ago, they played a show here in Cologne together with Alcest. And I mean, you know that I love Alcest, so I of course went there and was like, well, let's give Anathema a chance as well. I mean, I was in the front row for Alcest and Anathema, and it was awesome. And then Anathema started playing, and I mean, and I wasn't the only one thinking it. I mean, more than half of the crowd simply left.
Oh, that's cold.
I mean, it's very bitter to say that, but I mean, it was just. I mean, they stood there so self-confident and so, I mean, kind of, if I'm maybe honest, full of themselves, and the crowd simply wasn't buying it. And I mean, I went home, like most of the people there, and I mean, I've listened to the music, and there are a few songs here and there that are kind of okay, but no, the other two ones are better.
I don't know what's the deal with Anathema. I mean, sure, they're part of the Peaceful 3, but they're like we said before, like the forgotten one. If only there was a way they could somehow bring that back, but...
Yeah, but I doubt that will ever happen.
Yeah, they probably never go back.
Because I've got the feeling that they are so convinced about what they're doing, and... No.
I mean, like, there's
way
some
better
songs that
prog
I
bands
like.
out there, people.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Sorry, Anathema.
If I had to pick an Anathema album, I would have went with Serenades, the first album, because that is the most doomy, and also it's death doom with gothic on top. But even that's kind of a stretch. Ricky, you're number 6.
Well, you spoiled it already. Typo negative, Bloody Kisses. Well, since I brought up him Greatest Love Songs Volume 666 earlier, Peter Steele was a big influence on Levi to create Greatest Love Songs. And the reason was because Bloody Kisses, regardless of being gothic, it's so doomy. Like you brought up the song Summer Breeze, the cover, which that got a bit of attention when it was the theme song from the, I want to say the early 2000s, early 90s slasher I Know What You Did Last Summer with Jennifer Love Hewitt, and I got a lot of buzz. But not only that, you got the title track, Bloody Kisses. Christian Woman, probably one of their biggest hits ever. I mean, come on. I mean, you had the orchestra style, but Peter Steele's vibe, just the way he did his voice, like whoa, like
the bass.
Like, I'm like,
tone.
I mean,
upon her bedroom wall.
It almost sounded like he was like crying, like, you know, like when you cry, like, you know, that kind of like crying in a way. But like I said, Bloody Kisses is one of the most important gothic albums in the genre, and to a certain extent into doom, which, like I said, influenced Levi to create Greatest Love Songs. And you know, it's sad that Peter Steele's no longer with us. And you know, I think there was a rumor going on that the surviving members they wanted to bring back Typo Negative, which no, don't do that.
Nobody can replicate Peter's voice.
No, nobody. So yeah,
I mean,
my number.
we got
Could you
Carnivore back.
Could you replicate Peter Steele's voice? Could you replicate Dio's voice or Freddie Mercury's voice? It is impossible.
No.
It's a once
The
in a
only
lifetime
guy
situation.
the only guy in recent years that I can hear doing Dio pretty well, even though he didn't start off sounding like Dio, he had his own identity. But as he's gotten older, he sounds more like Dio, and that's Joey from Anthrax.
I have another one for you. It is from a band from, if I dare to say, Finland, who has been said to be the Ronnie James Dio lookalike, Jorn Lande from ex-Master Plan, but he is doing a solo band as well. Jorn Lande.
And Artur, while we're on you, let's get your number 6.
This is probably my most unknown bands out of all that I have on my list, and I may dislike now the Downfall Network YouTube channel and Brody if I hear him say all the time about autism and autistic and all that such. I swear to God that I'm going to shoot him. But they did a video that got me interested, which was doom metal bands that he enjoyed. There was Solitude Aeternus, there was Candlemass, spoiler, but there was this band that was completely unknown to me, but I got a chance to listen, and despite the fact that there's no, so to say, power doom metal or epic doom metal such, this is the closest thing that I got. From Italy, of all places, a band called Doomsort, and the album Resound the Horn from 2002. I mean, it's that low ethos that is a part of Doom. But while most Doom, they talk about sorrow, death, the old, anti-religion, and all those themes, they're talking about medieval history. They're talking about the Vikings, about everything should not in a doom metal genre. It is catchy. It is beautiful. Never entering on the gothic side. These guys make their own. These guys they make their own niche, so to say. So that's why my number 6, maybe the most unknown band out of my list. Once again, from Italy, Doomsort, Resound the Horn.
And while we're on you, Artur, number 5.
Levi almost destroyed my number 5 when he mentioned the K word, Catatonia. But you can try to guess which album I went for Catatonia, which is not, I repeat, not Brave Murder Day. Try and guess.
Oh, Lord. Well, the funny thing is like, I can't, my brain's going all over the place to figure it out.
No, that's okay. I'm going to say my number 5. It is my first. No, I'll mention straight. My number 5. It is the first of 3 that I have on my list, and Levi was correct a bit when he spoiled the band Catatonia. But I have 2 albums that I think, to me, they are some of the. I have 2006, The Great Cold Distance. I mean, it is an album that I still go to it on a regular basis with such dramatic songs such as Leaders, and even on the Leaders, the first song, you still hear Jonas Renska still going on a very guttural sound, a guttural, which is something that you don't hear too much of Jonas Rensk. But my twin is also very dramatic tie as well. But only I have the Great Cold Distance.
Ooh.
I have 2016's. It is the first album. Yeah. I also have the Great Cold Distance. It's over there on the shelf. But there is something about the Full of Hearts that makes me come back, especially when Old Hearts Fall. I mean, Old Hearts Fall is one of those songs that I just keep on listening. It is a sad song, talking about romances that I've got, trying to find a way to take over. Is also beautiful. Flagship. Catatonia has always been a band that has been evolving with and Jonas Rensk, and so
and amazing that they're releasing a new album this year, City Burials, coming this year.
Meh.
Me. My number 5. Oh boy. Oh god. My number 5. I know Artur's probably got higher, but I only have it at number 5, and that is, I would go up and get the album right now, but I'm too lazy to get up off my ass. Arguably the greatest album in the history of Death Doom, Last One on Earth by Asphyx. Oh, number 3, huh? At numero 3.
My number 3 as well.
The only reason I put at number 5, if I wanted to be for real, I would have probably put at number 2, but I wanted to give more love for more traditional Doom albums. But Last One on Earth, I've talked about many times on this show, like the death metal episode, the death metal albums. It's the perfect balance of doom and death, with a little thrash thrown into the mix.
Death metal vocalist in Martin Van Doorn.
Yeah, arguably the greatest, if not top 5. I mean, he's another one of those guys where he's often imitated but never duplicated. The closest one that gets to his level is Chris from Skeletal Remains. But top to bottom, masterpiece, one of the best album covers of a zombie priest in like a smoky graveyard. Plus the title track, the greatest Death Doom song ever written. And even the Rack you could put on here, even though that was not as doomy as Last One on Earth. And then over the years, even with different vocalists after this album, they still kept the vibe going. Like their self-titled album, which came out afterwards, had plenty of it. Even though their 2 albums afterwards, God Cries and On the Wings of Inferno, pretty much the forgotten albums. But their demo album, Embrace the Death, which was basically the early version of The Rack, but with different song titles and different lyrics, but same structure. Even that could have made my list. Or hell, even their last 3 albums, Death the Brutal Way, Death Hammer especially, and Incoming Death, could have made it. But I went with Last One on Earth, considering it's the most classic, the most known, and arguably the heaviest album in Doom history, arguably, because of just the guitar sound and just the sheer onslaught it delivers, but yet a brooding atmosphere on top. So, and I could have done this as a tie with Mental Funeral by Autopsy, because those 2 albums are like in tandem with each other. After all, these 2 are the most compared bands in Death Doom, because they're, if anything, closer to death metal than to Doom, but keeping the Doom atmosphere on top. So I could have done a third tie and put Mental Funeral on the list, considering that's very doomy. But Last One on Earth, just a more 50-50 balance, if not maybe 55%, 45%, with a tiny hint of thrash in the mix, which I love. So, my number 5, Last One on Earth by the great Asphyx, and please put out a new album this year, damn it! Please! It's been 4 years! Alright.
Go Vince McMahon.
Damn it, please release a new album, damn it!
Big beefy man, big beefy man, big beefy man, big beefy man.
Alright, Hannah, your number 5.
Well, my number 5 is dedicated to big beefy man. No, I'm just kidding. Again, a tie. But two classic doom metal band and pioneers of the scene, Saint Vitus, Born Too Late. Arguably, arguably their finest work. I mean, it's doomy, it's heavy. What else is there to say? It's just, in my opinion, their best and finest musical hour. Love this one, and then the next, Trouble, Psalm 9. Again, very classic album. In my opinion, Saint Vitus and Trouble, two of the most important bands of the development of the genre, after Black Sabbath, of course. And I simply felt that I had to put them high in the list, and that's why they're here.
Ricky.
My number 5 is Relentless by Pentagram. I almost didn't put a list because again, it's one of those pioneer bands that started the genre alongside Saint Vitus and Trouble. Pentagram is the one that I don't listen to that much, but I couldn't ignore its importance to the genre. I mean, the song Relentless, probably one of the best songs of the album. And, it's one of those bands that I need to listen to a bit more because I'm not really familiar with Pentagram as a whole. I just know the album Relentless because it's the great Relentless, and I need to listen more about them.
While we're on you, Ricky, number 4.
Well, Hannah brought the band, Saint Vitus, but I went with a tradition. We talked about Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath with the song Black Sabbath.
Saint Vitus by Saint Vitus.
Saint Vitus by the song. Yeah. I had to go with Saint Vitus by Saint Vitus. Number 3. I mean, the bass on this album, holy fucking shit, you can actually hear the bass. Like, even the song Saint Vitus. I feel like the bass in this album is more dominant than the guitar tone, in my opinion. And the vocals, I mean, come on. It makes you want to, like, just scream aloud, Saint Vitus! Saint Vitus! One of those albums that I discovered late, around maybe 2 years ago, and has grown deep into my cold black heart.
My number 4 has been spoiled quite a few times. Trouble, Psalm 9. I mean, Chicago band, which there wasn't that many at the time. Nowadays, you got countless bands that have come from Chicago, Broken Hope being one of them, Smashing Pumpkins, Disturbed, even November's Doom.
Billy Corgan is from Chicago?
Yeah. And he's a big fan of Trouble himself. Plus, according to Chris Jericho, the first song he ever learned was from this album with the song Revelation, Life and Death on bass. That was his first song he ever learned, which is weird to think that's your first song you ever learned on bass guitar. But, I mean, songs like Assassin, like, yeah, it's kind of like Asphyx in the sense that it gets a little thrashy at times, because they were inspired by the then emerging thrash scene, but still keeping the doom going strong. And this is a one of them weird ones, because they were being promoted as white metal because of their Christian-themed lyrics and how they would come out looking like hippies with flared-up pants and sunglasses. But it's still a very dark album. The title track, Psalm 9, probably my favorite, maybe my second favorite Trouble song. My favorite being Pray for the Dead off of The Skull, because that's such a damn heavy song. Damn good song at that. But Psalm 9 is, of course, a more classic. Plus, cool album cover with the tree and underneath a bunch of skulls with a skull made within the skull pile, which is really, really unique. Plus, they were on Metal Blade, one of the first bands to get big on Metal Blade in the 80s. But yeah, Psalm 9 at my number 4. And actually, I just remembered this was the final tie that I had on my list. This is going to probably be the most controversial pick of them all for this episode. Because I have said my opinion that I feel as though this band belongs closer to Doom than they do to grunge. Alice in Chains' Dirt. Because I don't see them as a grunge band. Just because they came out of Seattle didn't mean that they were in that genre. This album, Dirt, their most dark, depressing, slowest album. Like, it's an honest, perfect companion to, say, Master of Reality by Black Sabbath, in the sense that there's so much going on, but the Doom atmosphere is well placed on top. May not be the heaviest album out there, but it certainly, in my opinion, belongs in that Doom umbrella. Because it's got everything. The slow vibe, the depressing atmosphere, haunting song sections. And, of course, the harmonized vocals of Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell is one of a kind. Rest in peace, Lane. But yeah, I had to include them. I know it's controversial, but I feel they are a Doom band, not a grunge band. And even still to this day, more albums coming out, they're still very doomy, still slow songs, dark, and they're actually getting a little heavier now. Even though Rainier Fog in my mind was their worst album, but it was still great. Because they're one of these bands that just are incapable of putting out a bad
Someone's
album.
about to join in. Ford is about to win.
Oh, and just as the show's getting close to ending, Mr. Fireblade pops in. What timing.
Better late than never.
True. But that is my number 4, the final tie. Trouble Psalm 9 and Alice in Chains' Dirt.
That was probably the left field band I wasn't expecting at all.
And I almost forgot about it, too, because I keep making the case. They are Doom. They are not grunge. But now that Mr. Raphael Fireblade has popped in, very quickly, let's get through your list.
Your number 10 through number 4.
Yeah.
10, I got Swallow the Sun, the morning came. Swallow the Sun.
Good choice.
I also got 9, My Dying Bride, the light at the end of
Light at the End of the World.
number 8, Paradise Lost, Lost Paradise. Number 7, Pentagram, Day of Reckoning. Number 6, Celtic Frost to the Mega Darion.
Whoa.
That may be even more left field than Alice in Chains. Ooh.
Wow.
Megatherion. If I would have put a Celtic Frost album on my list, I would have went with Monotheist.
Wow.
And in fact, honorable mention, I'll say Monotheist, honorable mention, because that is quite doomy. But continue.
Continue.
Number 5, I Hate God in the Name of the Suffering.
Going sludge.
Number 4, Sleep, Dope Smoke.
Yeah, of course.
Alright.
Because I got
Wow.
I
To Mega Darion.
Scream Pops and Candlemat, Door of Doom, Electric Wizard, Black. Those are honorable mention.
Okay.
Okay.
And Artur's, I don't know what's happening with him. His camera
Artur's-
isn't loading.
He's fucked. He's loading up.
I'm here.
right.
Number 4. We're still number
Yep.
4, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Has Hannah presented her number 4 yet?
Nope.
Nope.
If Hannah wants,
Yeah, go ahead, so that way Artur can get his camera back up.
Well, my number 4 is Ahab, the Call of the Wretched Sea.
I should have known.
I mean, I love Ahab, and they are my favorite funeral doom metal band. There's just something special about the music, and I mean, this one is basically an adaptation of Herman Melville's Moby Dick, told out of Captain Ahab's perspective, and the storytelling on this album is just so awesome, and the slow and pounding drumming. And it's just so theatrical throughout the course of this album, and especially on my favorite track of this album, The Hunt. I mean, it starts out in kind of like with this suspense guitar solo. I mean, it reminds me so much of Jaws when the great white shark arrives, and then suddenly the heavy drumming kicks in. It's just so massive, and I mean, especially when you're listening to it on big headphones or a very good sound system, it's just so fucking heavy. You have to turn it on full volume listening to it. I mean, Ahab, what they're doing is just spectacular in my opinion. I mean, I could have put other albums on here like the latest
Songs
one,
from the Glen Carrig.
Yeah, the boats of the Glen Carrig.
Yeah.
Oh my god! For example, especially the intro track, "The Isle." It's such a huge soundscape, and I know I'm rambling about it, but I love it so much. And I mean, Ahab, they're very dear to my heart, and it was so amazing seeing them live. Hope to see them again soon, and hope they will release new material anytime soon. If you haven't heard about Ahab, go and check them out.
I need to check them out. But here's the big $1 million question. What's the name of that album again?
The Call of the Wretched Sea.
Call of the Wretched Sea. Now, you said that it's a album based on Moby Dick, right?
Yeah.
Now, the $1 million question, which do you think complements the book better? That or Mastodon Leviathan?
Ooh.
I think Ahab. Because
I would assume.
I prefer because there are some hard parts that complement with Leviathan and other parts that complement better with Call of the Wretched.
Yeah, since both albums are following the concept of Moby Dick.
Yeah.
I just had to ask because it just felt interesting.
I mean, and Levi, if I might suggest a song, please listen to The Hunt.
Alrighty.
Or The Isle. Both songs, I love them to death.
Well, you got some homework to do, Levi.
To add on to the albums I've missed so far this year, I've only listened to 3 albums from this year: Rage, Annihilator, and Sepultura, and I need to listen to others, but I've been busy with
Levi,
Minecraft and work.
I mean, Levi, it's only 2 songs, and both are only like 11 minutes long.
There you go. Anyways, have we gotten Artur's number 4 by any chance?
No.
I don't think so.
I kind of spoiled myself my number 4 when someone was talking about Paradise Lost. Raphael went with Lost Paradise. I think it was either Levi or Ricky that went with Gothic.
It was
me.
I'm going Draconian Times. I mean, I do have a bit of a personal history with this album. I've talked with Gregor and Nick about that history. One day maybe I'll mention that history here, but let's just say that Draconian Times helped me in a very difficult part of my life. And it is strange to believe that a Doom, which is borderline gothic album by Paradise Lost, would help someone during their darkest periods of their life. But in fact, they did. Songs like Enchantment, Hallowed Lands, Forever Failure, Once Solomon, Shades of God, even these were great songs. One that could transmit that feeling of being down, but still managing to find the beauty and to rise up again. And if there has been a band that has been always consistent with its members, it has been Paradise Lost. The only members that they have changed were their drummers. Yeah, they had Jeff Singer, they had Andrian Errolson, they had Lee Morris, Matthew Archer, but Nick Holmes is still in the band. The founders, in this case, the four founders, Nick Holmes, Gregor McIntosh, Aaron Eady, and Stephen Edmonds, they're still in the band to this day and state live performances. So, Draconian Times is my number 3. My number 4.
Yeah, and what's funny with Greg and Nick, they're also not only pillared parts of Gothic and Doom Metal, but also in Death Metal, considering now Nick's in Bloodbath now, and Greg had Volunfire for a while going before they broke up. And that was kind of like Entombed.
Was that their final show?
Oh. And Volunfire was kind of like the Death Doom version of Entombed almost, from what I heard. So that was interesting, but just wanted to bring that up. Now we're on to the top 3. I shall begin by talking about an album that got spoiled by Ricky, St. Vitus' self-titled. I could have went with Born Too Late, but I find myself listening to the debut more in recent times. And it's funny to think, looking back at with this album, the first song, the song St. Vitus, off the album St. Vitus by the band St. Vitus, we pointed out with Black Sabbath, that seems to be a tradition within Doom. Because you also had Witchfinder General with the song Witchfinder General and all this and that, blah, blah, blah. But the funny thing I like about with St. Vitus' first album, the song St. Vitus was the fastest song on the album. It was kind of almost speed metal to a degree. Then it just gets slower and slower and slower and slower as the album goes on, to the point where you get to the song Burial at Sea at the end. One of the slowest songs, but one of the best songs in Doom. Another fun fact, St. Vitus was the first metal band to be signed to a punk label. They were signed to Black Flag's SST label and recorded at the same studio Black Flag recorded their classic album My War, which the second half of that album you could argue is a great Doom EP, because it is pretty doomy. Even the first half is just more hardcore, but second half was very good doom metal for Black Flag. So found that to be really interesting, in how St. Vitus at the time were the first metal band on a punk label and recorded at a punk studio, because Henry Rollins and company saw something in them, because they were all big fans of Sabbath, and they're like, what if our region had a version of Black Sabbath? Out came St. Vitus, and they're like, we need to get this band on our label and get them to the studio now. And they were all really good friends and came out with this classic album among classics in the early days of the genre, and love it to this day. Plus, as Sam Dunn said, Metallica wasn't the first band to have a black album. Wink, wink. Because this was an all-black cover, which is pretty interesting. But what's funny, I should distinguish, this is the first self-titled, considering they had another self-titled out last year, which, that was a good album. Not nearly as good as the first self-titled. Just wanted to make sure nobody got confused, because they got 2 self-titles. It's kind of like the Killswitch Engage thing. Like, why do bands have to have more than one self-titled album?
Or it's kind of like Stone Temple Pilots, the debut and the latest one.
Yeah, it's like weird. Or unless you're going to do the Van Halen thing, do Van Halen 1, Van Halen 2, Van Halen 3. It'd be easier, but I digress. Raphael, you're number 3.
3, I chose Acid Keen's Bruced Woods.
Interesting choice.
A band I'm not familiar with.
Me neither.
Hannah.
My number 3 took me ages to actually find on vinyl, and that's this nice little.
Oh!
Good old Caius.
Oh,
Honorable mention! Honorable mention!
Yep.
Again?
Yep.
I just love this album so fucking much. I mean, Welcome to Sky Valley. Such a great predecessor to stoner metal. I mean, some might argue it's stoner rock, but I don't care because the album is just so good. It's the perfect album for a road trip. It wants you to drive around in your car, having that album on full volume. I mean, it's so fucking perfect, this album, and the atmosphere it creates. The guitars are fuzzy and so deep. I think they were even recorded with a bass amp, if I remember correctly, and then the bass is pounding as well. And the vocals on this album, for me, Caius is just so important for the development of stoner metal. And of course there's also Blues for the Red Sun, which is an amazing album as well, but I simply prefer Welcome to Sky Valley, especially the album opener, Gardenia.
Who can't go wrong with that song?
Yeah.
How long did it take you to find that album?
What?
How long did it...
Usually
2 years?
when I'm in a car, I prefer to put on.
For me, it's Caius. For me, the album, the absolute road trip album is Caius.
You can't go wrong with Sky Valley, and you also can't go wrong with Wheels of Steel.
Yeah. I was asking
I-
because in my record of store, they actually have it. Like a whole bunch of copies, so you could have.
Yeah,
You could have
thing
just.
is, I mean, the thing is, they re-released it, I think last year or so. But before that, you couldn't find copies of it. And I was on this vinyl trading thing, and then I saw it, and I was like, "Yo, I have to buy it now." And I did.
Oh no, Ricky dropped.
Poor Ricky, something's wrong with.
Uh-oh. Alright, Artur, you're number 3. Which I know what it is. Because I spoiled it!
Mother effing Asphyx. Mother effing Asphyx. Ah, fuck the PC. Motherfucking Asphyx. I mean, everyone knows my history with Asphyx. I even told both Alvin and Martin how I got into Asphyx when I saw them for the first time here in Portugal. And sure as hell I'm going to see them again in July at Vagos, in the same day as Testament. But
Hopefully they behave.
I'll be the one to say as well that Last One on Earth, it is an epic album. Death Doom of its finest quality, no question about it. I mean, Last One on Earth is still one of the songs that I enjoy the most. And if I want to say the more Death Doom song out of it, it's in fact Last One on Earth, especially the later end, when he starts not only to solo, but still keeping on that slow-paced riffage that he does. Not Martin, of course, but the guitarist at the time, which was Eric Daniels. It's still a beast. It's truly a beast of an album. In the same way that I could have put here, just as Levi said, The Rack, Death the Brutal Way, Death Hammer, Incoming Death. Hell, it's Death Hammer that has a song called "We Doom You to Death." That's
The
that's
Death Doom anthem that I can play on bass. And it's such a good song.
So in a way, number 3 is Asphyx's Last One on Earth.
Ricky, I know you want to talk about Asphyx.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur already said everything about it, and actually, this was the first band Arthur introduced me to the first time we talked, and I remember I listened to the album and holy shit, I just loved it. I mean, Arthur explained it perfectly. Last One on Earth, the song alone, one of the best songs I've heard from Asphyx. And then you got the album cover. You got a Walking Dead zombie priest. How much metal can you get in that? There it is. There it is. And I wish I could see Archer's reaction, but again, his camera's still, the loop.
Loading.
Yeah. But yeah, my number 3, Asphyx, Last One on Earth.
I forgot to mention this version of Last One on Earth. It's the remastered, but it has all the tracks from the Crush the Cenotaph EP that came out before. So, double bonus. I believe that's everybody's number 3. Well, it's time for the top 2. And I shall begin. This is a band...
Wait. I think there's one album we haven't mentioned yet.
One band we haven't talked about yet.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's Archer's number 1. So
yeah.
I think it's a bit of payback.
Perhaps. So my number 2.
I just want to see his reaction. Come on, I need the camera back. I need his reaction. I want to see. Wait.
We're getting it.
We're just come on, Archer. Come on, camera.
You can do it. You can do it.
Do it. Come on. Come on.
Oh, he'll be.
No, I think Raphael. Come
there
on.
he's getting back. Come on, camera. You can load.
Come
You're a good camera. You can do it. Why are we sounding like we're complimenting dogs for?
I don't know.
What is wrong with us?
Come on, camera, you can do it. We need you now more than ever.
I'm seeing.
No, we can't see you.
Yeah, we can't see you. Oh, lordy.
Oh, God. Hey, it's worth it. I want to see his reaction when it happens. I hope it is because it's...
Oh, my lord.
Come on, camera. Come on.
I'm seeing all of you.
Yeah, but we can't see you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't see you.
All we see is a blue stripe. Moving around.
Now Artur's the lagger now. First Ricky, then Hannah, and now Artur. You know who's not a lagger? Me.
Yeah.
Then
and
again,
Raphael,
I host this shit call, so there you go.
And Raphael to a certain extent.
Well, he has lagged in the past.
True. Come on, camera. Don't film me now. Come on.
All of this just so you can see his face for what I have to say at number 2.
Because I want to see his face. I want to see his reaction.
See me already?
No, I don't think we're gonna get your camera back, buddy.
But I'm sure I'm already certain that you are all going to say Candlemass.
Yep.
Well, it is Candlemass. But now, as far as the album, I went with...
Let me... Epicus?
Nope.
Bewitched?
Nope.
You
Nightfall.
went with Nightfall?
Nope.
Yep.
As Vince McMahon would usually say, "God damn it!"
So that's his number one. Nightfall.
Or that Ron Taylor just say, "Damn!"
It's my number one, along with Epicus, and another one that I'm going to talk.
Ancient Dreams.
Yep.
God damn it, Germany!
First strings.
But I personally, I went with something different.
Well,
Oh.
I went with Epicus as my number 2.
I did.
But anyways, me.
Meh.
Yeah.
You see, that's what I wanted his reaction.
Anyway, so my number 2, Candlemas Nightfall.
You're only getting the Vince McMahon reaction. God damn it! You're on fire, damn it!
Kiss my ass.
But I went with Nightfall because, well, for 2 songs. Bewitched and Well of Souls.
I bind unto myself today the strong name of the Trinity.
Plus, it helped spawn one of my favorite cover songs of all time when The Haunted did it, but did it thrashy instead of doomy, which is interesting. But regardless, I mean, Nightfall, the first album with Messiah Marcolin, in my opinion, the best vocalist they've ever had. Plus, he had a presence to him with theatrics, with his costumes, his hair. Plus, Bewitched. I mean, arguably one of the top 5 greatest Doom songs of all time. The music video, yeah, it was cheap, it was cheesy, but it was fun.
And a cameo from Dead.
Cheesy,
Cameo from Dead from Mayhem.
It was cheesy, but so warm most of the.
But, yeah, Nightfall, it just, to me, it sounded the most evil of any Candlemas album out there. It sounded more evil than Epicus and Ancient Dreams. Plus, it was heavier and more epic. Some people may call it Epic Doom. I just call it Doom because, yeah. But yeah, that's my number 2, Nightfall. Ricky, talk about Epicus, why don't you?
Well, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallica. For the longest time, I consider this the pinnacle of doom metal because it has it on the album. As time went by, I realized that Black Sabbath, Masters of Reality, was the true originator of doom metal. Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus is a close second. I mean, the song Solitude alone, one of the best doom metal songs of all time. From Sea of Solitude. That way that the song just warms my black heart, makes me want to go into the snow and just go on a journey, kind of like the Lord of the Rings style, and just, sure, I'll die probably, but I don't care. I'll be like, Solitude!
Even other songs like Demon's Gate is classic on it too.
Yeah, it is. But Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, even that album cover, I mean, you got a skull with a fucking crucifix stuck to it in the middle. How much metal can you get into that?
Hannah.
Like Arthur, I was thinking about choosing 3 albums, but in the end, I decided against choosing 3 and instead went for a live record. I choose Candlemas Live, released in 1990, with Messiah Marcolin on vocals, and the reason for that is because it basically contains all the classic Candlemas songs out of the first 3 records: Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, Nightfall, and Ancient Dreams. And it works well. It works live. It's done so well, and I love the vocals on here. For a live record, the production is really, really decent and very, very good, in fact. And I mean, everything you want to hear from Candlemass is on there. You've got the Well of Souls, you've got Bewitched, you've got Solitude, you've got Mirror Mirror, and so on. Basically,
Is Samaritan on it too?
Yeah, it's all on there as well. There's basically every classic Candlemass song on there, and it basically combines the three first Candlemass albums, and it's just awesome.
And I forgot to mention with Nightfall, with Well of Souls, arguably one of the greatest riffs in metal history. That riff, it's so good, and I like playing it on bass. Plus, it gave birth to the beginning of Niles' Una Slayer of the Gods when they paid tribute to that riff. So, wanted to throw that out there. Raphael, you're number 2.
My number 2 has to be Typo Negative Bloody.
Bloody Kisses. So that's 3 for Bloody Kisses on this show.
Well, Peter, rest in peace. That is a very classic album.
Alright, now we know what Arctur's number 2 is, so go ahead and get it on.
Oh.
The timing on that was impeccable, I swear.
Archer, you're number 2?
One moment.
One moment.
One moment.
Oh boy. Now that you have spoiled my number 1, I mean,
It's time for you to
Germany
spoil
with Ancient
most of our
Dreams,
number 1s.
Texas with Epicus, and Ohio with Nightfall. But then again, I kind of Ricky, I think I kind of spoiled my number 2,
And everyone's
and I
number
think
1.
and I think the other one is most of you's number 1. I went with my second tie as well. I went with a Black Sabbath tie. I mean, Sabbath, arguably the creators not only of heavy metal, but also.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Not again.
Alright, there you go.
I'm sorry, but everyone's images just froze. I mean, I just wanted to see what I could do, but I could not. No one in their right mind could do a list of doom metal without Black. So I'm going with Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath with a song Black Sabbath, their very first album. I mean, Wicked World, Evil Woman, NIB, Black Sabbath itself. I mean, it was the more jazzy, bluesy version of Black Sabbath, but the hallmarks of doom were there, especially with Black Sabbath itself. And the other one, which I'm guessing it's most of you's number 1, Master of Reality, their third full-length album. I mean, Sweetleaf, Embryo, the song that inspired South of Heaven by Slayer, which most Slayer fans refuse to say that South of Heaven is an original concept when the riff is Into the Void by Black Sabbath. The only difference is the tempo. Into the Void. Da na 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 na. South of Heaven. Na 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 na. Basically the same thing, but with different tempos. And how could not I mention we're children of tomorrow, children of the grave. Yeah. Damn, bam. I mean, both of these albums are superb. And out of those two, I would put Master of Reality as the quintessential doom metal album. So my number 2, Black Sabbath, and Master of by Black.
Alrighty, we're back. Alright, so it's time for number 1. Oh,
Meh. Meh.
Action is.
Or actually, no. We'll start with Artur. So, talk about Candlemass.
Since most of you already spoiled in my best Vince McMahon impersonation, god damn it! Yeah. I'm a huge Candlemass mark, and now I'm going to tell you how I got into doom metal. It was because of Nightfall. It was because of the Bewitched video clip that was broadcasted many years ago on when we had some alternative television here in Portugal, and we had a full-on metal show, which lasted for about an hour. But the presenter said, "We're going to show you an old video clip by a band called Candlemass, called Bewitched." And let me tell you, it was cheesy. Yes, it was. But so were most of Immortal's video clips.
Yep.
But
Call of the Winter Moon being the big one.
Blasphemy Mighty Raven Dark as well, which started the trend that one of the jobs of most Swedish and Finnish park rangers is to search for bands that got lost in the woods. That only. But whenever you, in the video clip, when you see Messiah Marcola coming out of that casket and starting to go, "Can't you see the devil
in me?"
I mean, I tried to sing like Messiah Marcola, and I can still reach some of his pitch, but not the very high pitches. But as for Epicus,
I can.
Yeah. Huh?
I can do it. But I won't do it right now.
Me neither. I don't want to scare the neighbors' cats. But
Be like King Diamond and scare the living hell out of some cats.
But Epicus, I only knew Candlemass from the Messiah Marcolan era and beyond. I never knew Epicus until years later. But Solitude, Crystal Ball, Under the Oak, Demon's Gate, they're amazing songs. And even I only thought that they only had one vocalist, Candlemass. I never thought that they had Johan Lundqvist, and later they would have not only Thomas Wikström from Therion, but also Rob Lowe from Solitude Eternus, and later Mats Levin. But the sooner I forget about Mats Levin in Candlemass, the better. But Ancient Dreams as well. I mean, Bells of Acheron, Ancient Dreams itself, Mirror Mirror on the Wall, already going to not such a strong Doom passage, but still keeping it as well. And that's why my number one is the Candlemass trio of Epicus, Doomicus Metallicus, Nightfall, and Dreams.
Alright, Artur, you're number one.
Already said it.
He said it already.
I meant to say Raphael. What is wrong with me?
Not enough booze.
Well, pretty much, what Arthur said a lot about this band, the band that started the metal scene in general, and Ricky's wearing the shirt. I decided to choose Black Sabbath, Paranoid.
Ooh.
Paranoid.
Yeah.
I mean, Electric Funeral is a great Doom song, so there you go.
And then you got the Rat Salad.
Warpig.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Iron Man. Paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, Hannah.
I mean, the three of us agree on this. Master of Reality, obviously, is the album that started it all. Of course, the earlier albums like the self-titled debut and the Paranoid are groundbreaking as well. But in my opinion, Master of Reality is the most important out of the bunch. just the atmosphere that is created by Tomi Iommi's fuzzy but heavy, doomy guitar riffs. It's just what would later define Doom. And the tracks on this album, every song is perfect, especially Children of the Grave, one of my favorite songs. And then a bit slower songs like Solitude. A lot of artists have covered songs out of these albums or used certain elements. It's just, for me, that's the one that started it all, and it's just something awesome. And to consider that it was released in 1971 makes it even better. For me, the kings or the originators of Doom have always been Black Sabbath, and especially this album.
Ricky?
Well, Masters of Reality. One of the most important albums in metal history. Not only for making Black Sabbath a bigger name, but also defining the sound of Doom. Like Hannah mentioned, Children of the Grave, one of the best songs in Black Sabbath's discography. You also got Into the Void. You also got Sweet Leaf. I mean, come on. You want to originate where stoner metal came from? Sweet Leaf. It's right there. I mean, the way it starts with... Which, in Tomi Iommi's autobiography, that wasn't intent. That was not on purpose. He just happened to just smoke in a joint, and the microphone were just they were plugged in, and he just coughed. And the producer was like, "That sounds perfect. Let's keep it." And then, that whole album is probably influential, one of the best doom metal albums of all time. Not only because Black Sabbath created metal, like I said before, they created everything from doom metal, traditional, progressive, even some certain degree thrash. And Masters of Reality, there's nothing that can top it.
And of course, that's my number one as well, Master of Reality. I mean, you got it all. You get the beginnings of traditional metal, the beginnings of stoner, the beginnings of doom, and even Children of the Grave can kind of be considered a bit speedy because it's a little bit of a faster sound to it.
Also groove metal to a certain extent.
And to some
A
people,
little bit.
The movie Hangover had a song feature.
Oh, Hangover 3, it had NIB on it, I remember. But yeah, I mean, this album, so many classics. Sweet Leaf, of course, the beginnings of stoner metal. Children of the Grave, as I said, probably arguably one of the first speed metal songs. Not necessarily thrash, but speedy. And, of course, probably their best song of all time, Into the Void, the song that closes the album. It is one of the most doomy things out there. But even other underrated tracks like After Forever, Lord of This World, even the softer, somber song Solitude on this album, way better than Changes, people.
Oh, come on. I love Changes.
I don't mind Changes, but I prefer Solitude as far as the softer stuff. But even the interludes, Embryo was pretty cool, Orchid as well. So from top to bottom, there's not a poor moment on this, and this is arguably one of the top 3 greatest albums in heavy metal history. And there's a reason why, because it's influenced so much. Even the first 2 albums, you could say the same thing, but as Sam Dunn had pointed out, this is when they really crystallized their sound that they were building on, and it all came to fruition with this.
And also...
And even with...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say Sabbath Bloody Sabbath also could be...
I was going to say that too. That was actually what I was going to say, was Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And all hail and God bless Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, and Bill.
And Dio.
And
Dio, and whoever else. That was Sabbath after.
And
Glenn Hughes, Ray
Cozy
Gillen,
Powell.
Tony
Ian
Martin,
Gillen,
Tony Martin, which
Vinny
basically,
Appice.
which no, I'm. But here's a bit. If you talk about Black Sabbath, most people will only talk about the Dio era and the Ozzy era. But mostly thanks to that Metal Mythos that I saw from the Rageaholic Razor Fist, where he did a whole introduction and a whole history on Sabbath, I kind of enjoyed also the Tony Martin era. I mean, Behind the Crooked Cross, not so much Dehumanizer nor Tear to a certain extent, but the people give a chance to the Tony Martin. Just in the same, with Iron Maiden, don't stick just with Bruce Dickinson. Listen to the Paul Di'Anno stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And with that said, wow, nearly 2.5 hours. It was going to be a slow one, and it certainly was. Anyways, thank you guys who was watching the premiere stream or the archive. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we're going to get nerdy again. It's top 10 concept albums.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, we're going to be talking about mostly, for some of us, mostly prog albums, maybe other styles that did concepts. We'll see. And there's a quick spoiler for you right there.
And with this, and also episode 30, after long awaiting, what we're gonna do, we decided that we're gonna do it on a scene that is mostly known for its tragedies.
Church burnings. Church burnings.
Yes, because
Church burnings. Murders.
episode
Church burnings. Varg.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you, Mark.
So essentially, episode 30 is going to be monumental. We're talking about Norwegian black metal, the controversies, the albums, the bands,
Lords
even
of
the
Chaos.
books and the films of it afterwards. So it might turn into a debate on the Lords of Chaos movie for a moment, but it's
You're
going to
pull me
be.
to that dark hole. To the
yes, we are.
We are.
Yeah.
So with that said, thank you for watching. Horns high, and we'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. God, I could really use some good quality entertainment, but all I got's $40. So what the hell am I going to do? Okay, let's see what we got to drink. Ah, fucking perfect. Some good old Powerade. Delicious. No, not really. Damn it, we don't even have Spam in here! Whoa!